10. Lost at Mesa Verde. In June of 2013, 51-year-old Dale Stilling set out for a short hike at Mesa Verde National Park. He was eager to explore the biggest archaeological preserve in the United States of America. Mesa Verde is 52,485 acres, with over 5,000 archaeological sites within its barriers. There are ancient cliff dwellings here, old watchtowers built by people centuries before Europeans arrived, and petroglyphs that date back to the end of the Ice Age. Human habitation in the region goes all the way back to around 9500 BC. It was a big place for Dale to explore, especially considering three very important things. First, Dale's wife described him as directionally challenged. This means he would have gotten easily lost. Second of all, he had no water. And thirdly, it was a blindingly hot and sunny day, and wouldn't have taken long before he became dehydrated and confused. Basically, it was an all-around terrible idea for him to go exploring by himself. Dale was seen near the Petroglyph Point Trail, and then he wasn't seen again for 7 years. It wasn't until 2020 that his skeletal remains were found 4.2 miles, or 6.7 kilometers from where he was last seen alive. He had wandered into the desert, gotten lost, and passed out from heat. Then he had quite literally cooked to death as he lay disoriented and confused. 9. Death by glacier. In Italy, a giant chunk of alpine glacier broke away from the side of a mountain and fell onto the heads of a bunch of hikers. It happened in July of 2022. The glacier broke loose, snow and rock dislodged from the mountainside, and all that debris came slamming onto hikers who were moving up a popular trail near the peak. 1 second, they had been climbing. The next, they were dead. While hiking in itself isn't a dumb thing to do, hiking up an extraordinarily dangerous mountain during one of the hottest summers on record definitely is. This was the most obvious time for glaciers to break off the mountain, and scientists have already blamed the accident on rising temperatures. Nonetheless, a brave group of mountaineers tried to get to the top. So far, as of July 19th, 11 fatalities have been counted. Rescue teams believe a 12th person may have died in the catastrophe, but the death toll probably won't go any higher. As for the actual mountain that killed these courageous adventurers, it's called the Marmolada. It's over 10,800 feet, or 3,292 meters above sea level, considered the highest peak in all the Dolomites. But according to scientists, the warming climate in Italy is making the glaciers more unpredictable. Even climbing in the summer can lead to deadly consequences. 8. The Mexican volcano. In June of 2022, a woman in her early 20s disobeyed the rules by climbing onto a completely off-limits volcano in Mexico. Her wild and stupid plan was to scale the side of the Popocatépetl volcano, which tourists are absolutely not allowed to do. Nobody is even allowed to touch this thing. But nonetheless, the woman and her climbing partner breached the barricade and began the climb. According to Mexico's Volunteer Mountain Rescue and Assistance Brigade, both climbers fell into a gully about 1,000 feet, 305 meters, shy from the crater at the top of the volcano. They had almost gotten to the top, 17,797 feet, 5,425 meters above sea level. But something went wrong, and it probably had to do with the fact that the volcano is active. This thing is constantly spewing out toxic fumes and ash, and climbing the side of it is like walking into a poison gas chamber. In fact, Popocatépetl volcano is so dangerous that climbers have been prohibited from going within 7.5 miles, or 12 kilometers of its peak since 1994. The victim, a 22-year-old local woman from the nearby town, identified by the mayor, would have known the danger very well. Still, she risked it all and lost it all. Her climbing partner was successfully rescued, but the woman was beyond saving. 7. Alligators in Florida. On Friday, July 15, 2022, an elderly woman fell into a pond in Florida and was eaten by a couple of alligators. It happened at the Boca Royale Golf and Country Club in Englewood. The woman was walking near the pond at the edge of the golf course, which was also near her home, when the tragedy occurred. Nobody knows exactly what happened. Maybe she leaned over to get a good look at the alligators, or perhaps she suffered some kind of medical emergency. An eyewitness said that the old woman was right beside the pond before she fell in, and then she was swarmed by the vicious reptiles. Immediately upon hitting the water, 2 alligators appeared at the surface and dragged the woman underneath with them. One of the alligators was a massive beast, at nearly 9 feet or 2.7 meters long, with the other a little smaller at just under 8 feet or 2.4 meters long. Both of the gators were removed from the pond after the incident, but the poor old woman never lived to see another day. By the time the police were able to pull her body out of the pond, she had already been dead for quite some time. She had been taking a leisurely stroll in her gated community, 1,000 acres of pristine golfing and nature, and she ended up as alligator food. 6. Mysterious tavern deaths. In South Africa, 21 people died abruptly at a tavern in East London's Scenery Park Township. It happened on June 26, 2022, and nobody has any idea what happened. The teens were between the ages of 13 and 17. They'd all been hanging out and drinking alcohol in the tavern, when suddenly they dropped dead. When their bodies were found, they were lying strewn across tables and chairs, lying on the floor, and slumped over the bar. It was like a toxic bomb had gone off and killed everyone instantaneously. All these months later, the police are still trying to figure out what happened. It's become a huge mystery with only one real clue. Analysis of the bodies has confirmed that all 21 victims had the chemical methanol in their blood. Methanol, for those who don't know, is one of the most toxic forms of alcohol. Methanol is so volatile that it can be used as fuel and is typically used as an industrial solvent and pesticide. However, methanol can also be used to make extremely potent homemade alcohol, like moonshine. It looks like the tavern may have been serving some kind of illegally distilled booze, or someone had passed some of it around and everyone who drank it died. 5. Over the railing. A rising Houston DJ died in Texas on July 4, 2022. She died after tumbling off the edge of a high-rise apartment building and coming down hard on the pool deck. She was only 23 years old. Her name was Darian Lewis, although she called herself DJ D-Baby. She was hanging out with some friends on the 13th floor of the Camden downtown apartments and was highly intoxicated. It was early in the morning. Darian and all her friends had been drinking heavily, and the party was winding down. It was time to leave, but Darian was allegedly planning to drive home while drunk. According to a post from Darian's friend Nishia Jackson, who had been present the night of the party, Darian just wasn't in her right mind. She was trying to leave the apartment and drive home wasted, and when her friends blocked the door and wouldn't let her go, she became erratic. 13 floors above solid ground, Darian began messing around with the patio furniture. She climbed onto a patio chair, lost her balance, and tipped over the side of the railing. Darian went down hard and fast and landed on the pool deck on the 9th floor. She only fell 4 floors, but it was enough that she died instantly on impact. 4. Workout collapse. On June 4, 2022, a man collapsed unexpectedly after a gym workout and died. His name was Sri Vishnu, a 27-year-old man from India. He had just completed his normal workout session when he passed out without any warning or probable cause. He wasn't drinking, he never smoked, and he didn't suffer from a single medical condition. All things considered, Sri Vishnu was an upstanding citizen with no bad habits. He'd been going to the gym steadily since he was 24 and never had any issues. We actually have no idea why he passed out and died. It didn't make any sense. According to his trainer, the only unusual thing that happened was that Sri Vishnu had eaten some bananas in between his workouts. He paused his weightlifting, munched down some bananas, and then kept on lifting weights. Then, at about 10:15 that evening, he finished working out and was getting ready to leave the sports club. He was talking with his trainer when suddenly his eyes rolled up in his head and he fell down dead. There was never any information released on his exact cause of death. It probably didn't have anything to do with the bananas and may have been more to do with his heart suddenly giving out. It was just one of those dumb freak accidents that could happen to anybody, at any gym, at any time. 3. Roller coaster nightmare. The Cobra roller coaster is the most dangerous ride at the Tivoli Friheden amusement park in Aarhus, Denmark. When the roller coaster began operating in the park back in 2008, there was an accident almost immediately. The front part of the roller coaster broke away, leaving 4 people seriously injured and on the brink of death. They all survived, but it was a very close call. Despite killing nearly 4 people right after opening, the roller coaster continued to stay in operation. And in the summer of 2022, another terrible tragedy took place. A teenage girl died when the ride came off the rails. The girl was only 14 years old and had been having a good time going from thrill ride to thrill ride. Then, from out of nowhere, the back part of the roller coaster came off its rails, so that the part the girl was sitting in got jammed underneath the track. It was only the back 2 seats that got jammed up, but that just so happened to be the seat the little girl was sitting in. This wouldn't have been so bad if the roller coaster was going slower. Unfortunately, the coaster is 82 feet, or 25 meters tall, and has a top speed of 44 miles per hour, or 71 kilometers per hour. When something going that fast comes to an abrupt halt, somebody gets hurt. This little girl didn't make it, but the 13-year-old boy sitting beside her was rescued with minor injuries. 2. Deadly duck eggs. A retired retail manager decided he was going to treat himself to something delicious. He picked up a few duck eggs, took them back home, fried them up, and had a delicious meal. He had purchased the eggs at a country show, and they seemed pretty legit to him. Sadly for the retired retail manager, identified as Niptun Tavakoli, the duck eggs gave him salmonella poisoning and he died. According to the intensive care specialist who dealt with Niptun on the day of his death, it was one of the worst cases of salmonella he had ever seen. It's because Niptun had waited way too long to go to the hospital after getting sick. He purchased the eggs from a stall at a rural country show in North Lincolnshire on June 2, 2019. He didn't call an ambulance until 5 days later on June 7th because he had such severe diarrhea and vomiting. But what really killed him wasn't the duck eggs, but the incompetence of the ambulance crew. The paramedics didn't take him to the hospital and simply told him to get healthy. His wife Cheryl had to call an ambulance again on June 10th because she was pretty sure her husband had developed sepsis. His lips and nails had turned blue. This time, the ambulance crew finally agreed to take him to the hospital, but by then, the salmonella had already killed him. Parts of his body had turned black. He was in an extremely dire condition, and just shy of 2 months after he had originally eaten the eggs, he died in the hospital. 1. Swimming in Missouri. A man from Missouri went swimming in Iowa, became infected with a terrifying brain-eating amoeba, and died. All he had wanted to do was go for a dip, but he ended up with his brain literally being consumed by a deadly infection. It's called the primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, and it was caused by the Nagliera fowleri amoeba. According to Missouri Department of Health officials, it's such a rare way to die that they refuse to release any real information about the particulars, out of respect for the family. All we know is that the health department became aware of the infection on July 6, 2022. We also know the unfortunate victim was probably swimming at the Lake of Three Fires in Taylor County. The lake closed briefly, probably as a safety measure so that nobody else can get their brain eaten. If you're wondering just how at risk you are of contracting a similar sickness, it's not completely out of the question. The infection happens when fresh, warm water containing the amoeba goes up a person's nose. It then travels to the brain, where it starts to eat the brain tissue. It's not contagious, and it can't be contracted from swallowing lake water. It only happens if water shoots up your nose. And unfortunately, the fatality rate for those infected is over 97%, according to the CDC. Out of the 154 cases of this bizarre way to die reported in the US, only 4 people have survived.
8. Dominic Barragan. Dominic Barragan and his girlfriend had a rocky on and off again relationship. The 25-year-old man from Manchester claimed to be a devout Christian and used religion as a form of control over his partner. But the young woman broke things off for good back in 2016 when she decided to no longer tolerate Barragan or his drug abuse. A fight between the two got physical, leaving her scared and physically injured. She went to stay with her mother, but Barragan couldn't accept that they were over and continued to contact her. One day, he broke into her house when she wasn't there and snooped through her things. When he found evidence that his ex-girlfriend had been intimate with another man, he flew into a rage and set her house on fire. By the time firefighters got the flames under control, the home had major damage. Barragan turned himself into police and initially denied any wrongdoing, but eventually fessed up to the crime. His lawyer told the court that Barragan had limited experience with romantic relationships and that he suffers from many family and emotional issues. But this was no excuse for terrorizing his ex and burning her house down. Barragan ultimately pleaded guilty to assault and arson and received a 3-year prison sentence for his actions. 7. Caitlin Conley. Caitlin Conley began working at Dr. Mary Yoder's chiropractic office in Whitesboro, New York, and dated the doctor's son, Adam. The couple also had an iffy relationship, but Caitlin and Mary seemed to get along well and managed to keep their interactions professional at work. One day in 2015, Mary suddenly became extremely ill. She was rushed to the hospital, where she went into cardiac arrest several times before passing away at just 60 years old. Her death came as a shock to her loved ones, who described her lifestyle as healthy and said that she had no major health issues that they knew of. Authorities also found Mary's death suspicious, so they started investigating. They discovered that Mary had been poisoned with a chemical named colchicine, which is normally used for treating gout patients. Detectives initially suspected the victim's husband, William Yoder. They became even more suspicious when the widower started dating Mary's sister a few months after her death. William maintained his innocence though, and was soon cleared of any wrongdoing despite his strange new relationship. Investigators then shifted their focus to Adam, who was known for having a massive temper. Their suspicions peaked when they found a bottle of colchicine in his vehicle. An anonymous letter they received also blamed Adam for the murder, but he quickly proved that he was hundreds of miles away during the day his mother died. Detectives then looked towards Caitlin Conley, who had a history of going to extreme lengths to get revenge against Adam after their many breakups. They found evidence that Conley had ordered the colchicine online and had even poisoned Adam in the past. She was convicted of manslaughter after her first trial ended in a hung jury and is now serving a 23-year prison sentence. Conley had initially admitted to writing the mysterious letter accusing Adam of murdering Mary, but is now claiming the confession was coaxed out of her. Caitlin continues to maintain her innocence and is fighting tirelessly to overturn her case's conviction. 6. Sophie George. A 23-year-old man from East Sussex, England, had a close call with death in 2020 after picking up his ex-girlfriend, 18-year-old Sophie George. She first ordered him to drive somewhere, where she picked up 2 shopping bags. When the man asked what was going on and why she was acting weird, Sophie allegedly pulled a knife on him. A struggle broke out as the victim pried the weapon out of his attacker's hand and threw it into a bush. He then called the police when the crazed woman bit his finger to the bone. Officers searched the shopping bag Sophie had grabbed during the suspicious stop she asked her boyfriend to make. They found a heap of evidence, including detailed plans for what seemed like a murder plot, along with a checklist containing steps for covering up the crime, changing identities, and starting a new life. The cops also found a kit with bleach, rubber gloves, pliers, a headlamp, garbage bags, masks, a shower cap, a scrub brush, and more. Prosecutors accused Sophie of plotting to torture and kill her ex-lover in a twisted revenge scheme. She pleaded guilty to attempted murder and a weapons charge and was sentenced to 13 years in prison for her insane behavior. 5. Eric Locke. When 31-year-old single mother Sonia Blunt went to the Plaza Hotel in Tallaght, Ireland in 2014, she expected to meet a man she'd been speaking with online. Instead, she came face-to-face with her ex-boyfriend Eric Locke, who'd lured her with a fake social media account. Locke and Blunt started out as friends and then dated for a brief period, but Sonia was quick to break things off when Locke began showing concerning displays of jealousy. She had been in abusive relationships before, so when Locke called her a slut because some men looked at her in a bar one night through no fault of her own, she knew the mistreatment would only get worse if she kept seeing him. Locke tried persuading Sonia to give him another chance, but she kept refusing. He sent her hundreds of messages, forcing her to block him on social media. Sonia moved on with her life until it was senselessly taken from her in a hotel room, where Locke strangled her to death. He argued to receive a diminished responsibility ruling in court, claiming he was suffering from mental illness at the time he killed Sonia. But the jury didn't buy it and unanimously found him guilty. He's currently serving out a life sentence. 4. Andrew Bradshaw. In late 2021, authorities charged Cambridge, Maryland Mayor Andrew Bradshaw with 50 counts of distributing revenge porn after he allegedly put up photos of his ex on Reddit. The state prosecutor's office accused the 32-year-old of posting the images under multiple usernames, containing variations of the woman's actual name and birthday. Documents also claim the post contained racial slurs and other derogatory language. Bradshaw originally faced up to 2 years in prison and a fine of up to $5,000 for each count, according to prosecutors. In a statement, State Prosecutor Charlton T. Howard reassured the public that his office is committed to pursuing offenders who are accused of serious crimes like revenge porn, which he described as a serious breach of trust and an outright invasion of privacy. He also preached his commitment to protect victims of those who abuse their positions of power and trust. Authorities were made aware of Bradshaw's alleged crimes after the victim found her private photos online and reported it. She said Bradshaw was the only person she'd send the pictures to, so he quickly rose to the top of the suspect list. He resigned from his political position and is no longer the mayor of Cambridge. He also pleaded guilty to 5 counts of distributing revenge porn after his failed relationship with the victim. The resolution came as part of a plea deal between Bradshaw and the prosecutors, resulting in suspended time in prison, $5,000 in fines, $750 in restitution, and 100 hours of required community service. 3. Majid Movaheedi. Majid Movaheedi started stalking Amina Barami in 2004 after they met as students studying at the Azad University in Iran. He proposed to the young woman many times and continued to bother her, even after she turned him down countless times. Police failed to take any action when they were told about the ongoing harassment, leaving Barami to handle the situation all on her own. And when Movaheedi realized he would probably never change her mind, his behavior escalated to violence. Barami was walking home from work one day when Movaheedi came up to her and threw acid on her face. The woman screamed in pain as a crowd gathered, unsure of how to help. She was left disfigured and blinded by the attack, which Movaheedi bragged about in its aftermath while his victim fought for her life. 4 years after the attack, a court ruled in favor of an eye for an eye punishment, popularly known in traditional Islamic courts as qisas. Bahrami was given the opportunity to be present, while a doctor stood over Movahedi and poured a few drops of acid into his eye, so he might know a fraction of the pain his victim felt. Although she had been blinded in both eyes, the punishment only allowed for one of her attacker's eyes to be damaged. The day finally came in 2011, but Bahrami had a change of heart while officials were counting down the seconds before they planned to make Movahedi unconscious and pour the acid. At the very last moment, she stopped them. She later told The Guardian that Movahedi fell at her feet in complete gratitude. Up until that point, he'd expressed basically no remorse for what he'd done, and had even called for Bahrami's eyes to be gouged out completely to make sure she could no longer see. Bahrami told Movahedi to leave and to never say her name again. She later wondered whether she made the right choice as acid attacks continued throughout Iran. Perhaps if she'd carried on with the punishment, it would have discouraged at least a few of the attacks by reminding perpetrators what might happen if they were caught. To add insult to injury, Movahedi was released from prison without compensating Bahrami's family, despite the court ordering him to do so. But Bahrami has since moved on with her life and to another country, where she's undergone dozens of reconstructive surgeries for her facial injuries. 2. Liam Bergman. 19-year-old Liam Bergman was a student at Berkeley High School in California when he made headlines back in 2021 for threatening revenge porn against multiple women. Authorities first heard of the situation when some victims reported to Berkeley officials that they were being targeted by a hacker who broke into their Snapchat accounts and tried to extort money out of them for their intimate photos. When it became clear that this was a serious problem, law enforcement took over the investigation, and shortly after that, the FBI got involved with things. They traced the activity to Bergman and obtained a search warrant. They found evidence of blackmail, as well as dozens of women's login credentials and personal information, like birth dates, home addresses, and more. Detectives also uncovered highly illegal content, including hundreds of inappropriate images and videos. The evidence suggested that the crime started as far back as August 2020. While it was unclear just how many women Bergman knew personally, investigators suspected that he deliberately targeted his victims. An officer took him into custody after seeing him jogging in his neighborhood and recognizing him as a wanted individual. Authorities charged Bergman with over a dozen misdemeanors, including distributing images of intimate body parts with the intent to cause distress, and multiple felonies including identity theft, accessing computer systems he was unauthorized to use, distributing photos and videos as revenge porn, and more. According to the most recent update, Bergman's attorney had filed motions to have 4 out of 6 felony counts dismissed altogether. Because he was an adult when the alleged crimes happened, it's very possible he'll receive prison time if convicted. 1. Todd Mullis. Police rushed to a property in Earlville, Iowa one day in 2018 after getting a call from a local farmer named Todd Mullis who claimed he'd found his wife Amy laying unresponsive in a shed. He told the 911 operator that it looked like she'd been in some kind of freak accident and that she had no pulse. Mullis later told police that the couple's son had found Amy with a corn rake in her chest and that she must have somehow fallen on the tool. The son removed the rake from his mother's body and they rushed her to hospital, where she was soon pronounced dead. An emergency room doctor noticed that Amy's injuries seemed to tell a different story than what Mullis had claimed. She had 6 puncture wounds, yet the pitchfork she'd supposedly fallen on only had 4 spikes. Detectives looked deeper and learned that Amy and Todd had a tough marriage. The couple had tied the knot 14 years before and had 3 kids together, but at some point Amy became unhappy with Todd's controlling ways. She had an affair close to home, cheating on her husband with an employee who worked at their farm. In the meantime, she told her friend she was afraid to leave Todd, who was firmly opposed to getting a divorce. When questioned by investigators after the death, Todd initially denied knowing anything about Amy's affair, but people who knew the couple claimed he'd caught his wife in the act. The couple stopped sharing a bed after this, and Amy warned her friends that if anything ever happened to her, Todd was responsible. It was almost as if she knew her life would soon be over. A search of the family's home found incriminating evidence pointing toward Todd as the likely culprit of his wife's death. He was found guilty of first-degree murder and challenged the conviction, but the decision was upheld. Todd is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole and continues to claim innocence.
Number 9. Nikki Uvino. Two Sacred Heart University football players had their lives flipped upside down back in 2016 when they were accused of committing an assault against a young woman during a campus party in Fairfield, Connecticut. Both men were later suspended from their team and lost scholarships based on the allegations. Their accuser, 18-year-old Nikki Uvino, allegedly told investigators the men had pulled her into a room and held her down. They then supposedly took turns attacking her. She said that she told them she didn't want anything to do with them and that she begged the men to let her go. But several witnesses reportedly told police that it seemed like Uvino willingly went into the room with the athletes. When questioned about this, she took back her story and admitted making the story up in a bid to gain sympathy from a different man she wanted to date. After this case went to trial, Uvino pled guilty to charges of second-degree false reporting and interfering with police. She served 1 year in prison, followed by 2 years of probation thanks to her lies, and was denied an early end to her punishment. Number 8. Emory Ellis. A homeless man from Boston named Emory Ellis didn't expect to get arrested when he went to buy some breakfast from Burger King one morning in 2015. But staff members accused him of trying to pay for his food with a counterfeit $10 bill, so the police got involved. Ellis sat behind bars for 3 months on simple allegations of forging a banknote and violating probation, until the Secret Service actually determined the bill was real. Prosecutors dropped the forgery charge and later released Ellis, but the incident left long-lasting emotional scars. Ellis sued Burger King in 2018 for discriminating against him based on his appearance. He claims they treated him unfairly since he was a homeless black man. Speaking with the Associated Press, his attorney, who happened to be white, Justin Drexler, said, "A person like me would have gotten an apology, but a person like Emory somehow finds his way in handcuffs for trying to pay for his breakfast with real money." Burger King responded to Business Insider's request for comment by saying the company couldn't comment on ongoing litigation, but that they don't tolerate discrimination of any kind in their restaurants. The outcome of the lawsuit remains unclear. Number 7. Misreported facts. In 2022, the Macon County Sheriff's Office in Georgia received an email claiming that the agency used a photo of a man wearing a turban and holding an automatic rifle during an active shooter drill. The accusation-filled letter to Sheriff Robert Holland came from the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, the largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization in the U.S. Vice News picked up the story after CAIR published the full letter, prompting dozens of other advocacy groups, outlets, and social media users to pass the story on from there, leaving the sheriff's image irreparably tarnished. And if the department had actually done what it was accused of, the damage would have been fair, but that wasn't actually the case. Sheriff Holland and his department received concerning threats regarding this alleged discrimination. Holland successfully rebuked the rumor by pointing out how the sheriff's office had never held an active shooter drill at the local school where the footage was filmed. While clearing one's name in a world full of people who believe what they want is far from easy, CAIR apologized for the mistake, which helped to put the wildly false allegations to rest. The Southern Scoop newspaper also caught on to and was quick to clear things up between what the sheriff was being accused of and the actual facts. In the meantime, a CAIR spokesperson said the organization is still determined to find out which agency did use the stereotypical active shooter target. The representative also criticized Holland for failing to respond to CAIR's initial letter concerning the incident or to the Vice News article that reported about it. Number 6. John Harden. In 2014, a Heritage Creek, Kentucky man named John Harden tried to buy some alcohol at a convenience store and was denied by the cashier, who believed he was already too drunk. Harden returned to the store later to buy a bag of potato chips, and an officer working security at the time allegedly lifted him up off the ground and slammed him into the floor. Harden sued the officer named Keith Hillman for false arrest and imprisonment. He accused Hillman of using excessive force, arresting him without enough cause, and maliciously prosecuting him. The court sided with Harden regarding the arrest without probable cause, but dismissed his claim of excessive force being used. A jury ultimately ruled in Officer Hillman's favor. Harden continued to pursue the case, though, which eventually made its way to the Federal Court of Appeals. In the meantime, a black juror from a previous trial raised concerns about possible racial bias from her white peers, who allegedly called Harden a crackhead and maliciously referred to his legal team as the Cosby family. She believed the jury's preconceived notions about Harden had stopped him from getting a fair trial. The former juror also said the other jurors accused Harden of drinking or using drugs during trial breaks in order to make himself seem calm in court. When she reminded them that their job was to focus on whether or not Hillman used excessive force, they apparently responded by accusing Harden of wanting some free money. The Sixth Circuit Court determined the jury's belief that Harden was on drugs constituted overt racial bias. This case is one among many more that highlight the ongoing problem of racial bias among jurors and calls into question whether a jury can truly be impartial in court cases. Number 5. Rebecca Whitehurst. In 2019, Rebecca Whitehurst was working as a school teacher one day in Manchester, England, when she noticed a visibly upset student. She reached out to the boy and invited him to a mindfulness session in hopes of helping him get set on a better path. But the 40-something-year-old teacher's good deed was met with horrifying allegations that she abused the student, who was less than half her age. The boy claimed that Whitehurst committed unspeakable acts of misconduct, both in her car and online through WhatsApp. Soon enough, she found herself facing multiple charges in connection to the alleged abuse. Prosecutors argued that Whitehurst had become involved with the student unlawfully. In the meantime, the disgraced educator's defense lawyers claimed that while Whitehurst could have handled the situation in a more professional way, the student wasn't a victim at all and was the real abuser. They accused him of targeting Whitehurst with threats and manipulation and of faking an inappropriate WhatsApp conversation that he submitted to law enforcement as evidence to use in court against the teacher. Whitehurst testified that the teen had initiated contact with her through Snapchat and had claimed he was in love with her. She said she made it clear to him that his behavior was beyond unacceptable, but despite the effort, he continued to approach her when she was alone in the classroom and even made physical advances towards her. When she turned him down, he allegedly spat in her face and slapped her. Describing herself as gullible, Whitehurst said she felt stupid for giving her contact information to a student and that her humiliation over the situation stopped her from reporting his behavior. At one point, she even told the boy she was going to the hospital and wouldn't have her phone in an attempt to stop him from trying to speak with her. She also told him she wanted no further contact, but claimed the boy continued to pursue her relentlessly. In a move that shocked prosecutors, a jury believed Whitehurst's version of events and acquitted her of all supposed charges. Number 4. Michael Shannon. One evening back in 2004, someone approached a group of 3 men on a New Orleans sidewalk and fatally shot 46-year-old Ralph Kaur Jr. before getting into a vehicle and driving away. 7 witnesses described the shooter as a black man that stood about 6 feet, 1.8 meters tall, but most of them failed to get a close enough look to accurately identify him. In the meantime, detectives believed that the murder stemmed from an ongoing feud between the victim's brother, Darren Cole, and another man named Wayne Palmer. An informant claimed that Palmer's cousin, Michael Shannon, was the supposed shooter, and that he wanted to kill Darren, but mistook Ralph as his brother and mistakenly shot him instead. Two of the witnesses were shown a photographic lineup containing Shannon's photo. Emma Burgoyne, who was stopped at a traffic light nearby when the shooting happened, identified Shannon as the main culprit. The other witness who looked at the lineup identified different suspects. Based on Burgoyne's singular testimony, Shannon was convicted of second-degree murder, even though he was only 5 feet 6 inches, 1.7 meters tall, and didn't match the description of the shooter at all. His trial lasted just 5 hours. 2 jurors questioned Burgoyne's credibility and voted to acquit Shannon based on the apparent lack of evidence. But in Louisiana at the time, 10 guilty votes were enough to convict someone. After deliberating for 30 minutes, the jury returned with a verdict. Shannon maintained his innocence throughout and won a new trial in 2017. But before it could happen, the district attorney dropped the charges against him and said in a statement that Shannon was likely not the one responsible for Cole's murder. He was freed from prison and received a $113,000 settlement from the state after spending more than 12 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. Number 3. Amy Salerno. When a Franklin County, Ohio jury found a defendant not guilty of a misdemeanor assault, they were reprimanded by Judge Amy Salerno, who had a reputation for being incredibly harsh. She allegedly verbally berated the jurors in court and accused them of coming to the wrong conclusion about the case, leaving them embarrassed and upset. Salerno's ruthlessness caught the attention of her colleagues. So she publicly apologized for her behavior after a court determined that she subjected the entire Ohio judicial system to widespread criticism and ridicule. The disgraced judge made headlines yet again a few years later in 2019 when the Ohio Supreme Court found her guilty of judicial misconduct for a second time. Her license to practice law was then suspended for a year, and she was ordered to undergo more ethics training. If she failed to do so or committed more misconduct, she risked losing her law license permanently. Salerno admitted to some of her wrongdoings, including secretly negotiating with the defendant's attorney to lower their bail from $350,000 down to $85,000 without consulting the case's prosecutor. She was also accused of regularly losing her temper and acting out in anger. But there's always more than one side to a story. Over 30 people, including lawyers and another judge, wrote to the court testifying that Salerno had good character. Regardless of what the truth may really be, her decision to accuse a jury of reaching an inaccurate verdict seems to have been the unraveling point in her judicial career. Number 2. Ricky Martin. Puerto Rican singer Ricky Martin rose to fame in the US during the late 90s with his viral hit single Livin' La Vida Loca. He made headlines for incredibly different reasons in recent years though, when his nephew Dennis Yadiel Sanchez Martin accused him of committing horrific acts of abuse. Martin's reputation suffered during the controversial case. He adamantly maintained his innocence, and his accuser eventually took back their claims. But it wasn't enough to restore the singer's name, and he was left picking up the pieces of his career even after he was technically cleared of all wrongdoing. In an attempt to make it abundantly clear that he was falsely accused, and to recover some of his losses, Martin filed a lawsuit against his nephew in civil court earlier this year. The lawsuit accuses Sanchez Martin of persecuting, besieging, harassing, stalking, and extorting Martin for his own financial gain. Martin also claimed that his nephew stepped up his campaign of destroying the singer's reputation whenever his bids to get money failed. Additionally, the lawsuit says that Sanchez Martin even admitted under oath that Ricky never assaulted him. Martin claims he's lost tens of millions of dollars over the situation and is hoping to recover at least a portion of his assets through the case. Number 1. Caroline Lee. A Florida school teacher named Caroline Lee had recently been named the Teacher of the Year at the Darnell Cookman School District in Jacksonville when an 8th grade student accused her of hitting them in 2021. The 60-year-old educator was then charged with child abuse and was released without bail, but still lost her job in the process. In the meantime, concerned parents got a letter from the district reassuring them Lee had been removed from the classroom and wouldn't be back while her case was being conducted. Footage from the alleged incident showed Lee walking behind a student with what prosecutors described as an aggressive pace. The video later showed the pair leaving the classroom at about the same time, with the student holding their hand up to their face as if they were hurt. The alleged victim claimed Lee had called them an inappropriate name and struck them multiple times in the head. Nearly a year later, the state attorney's office dropped the charges against Lee based on a lack of evidence. After having her life turned upside down by the harsh allegations, the former teacher has called for increased protections for educators against false accusations of abuse. While some believe a lack of evidence doesn't necessarily mean Lee is completely innocent, she maintains that she did not hit a student and said the experience has left her traumatized. Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend months in court fighting over something you didn't do, or find out that someone spent months in jail after you misidentified them for a crime? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye.